Many of you will remember this. This was our van. We gave it to a retired couple to replace their old van with. That was in pretty rough shape, and they have definitely gotten good use out of it. They have put well over 20,000 miles, 28,000 miles on this in the last couple of years. Well, it's having a problem where it's jerking and carrying on, and he's afraid it's gonna die on him. Well, I was thinking we might have a problem in our coil pack or a supply signal to it, something like that. So I just wanted to run codes real quick. So I got it off the truck. I used my Freightliner Go Get It, and I put the scanner on it. Well, here's what happened. I turned the key on, put the scanner on it, was waiting for the scanner to boot up, and in that time, there wasn't enough power for it to crank over. That's all we get. So I went out here and I was gonna get my battery charger. I'm like, well, that's not that old of a battery, so it seems, from Walmart. And then I looked. There's grease on the battery terminals. Yeah, that's not gonna work. These is obviously not the right battery. It should be reversed in the positive over here. So I don't know how old that battery is. I guess it doesn't matter. But we'll just get the right one and put in it, because that's not correct. So we'll start with that. Alright, so I got the battery terminals all cleaned up, and the posts and the terminals on the cables, and I'm going to charge it up. I don't know that it's actually low, but I want to charge it up, let it sit, and I want to load test it and make sure it's a good battery going into winter. If it's not a good battery, we're going to replace it. If it's not, we're going to let it go, because there's some other things going on with this thing that may change the direction we're going to take. So next thing, get the scanner hooked up. Let's see what we got for codes. Alright, so I checked the codes, and I got a telephone call, so I didn't record it, but what was going on originally was he was having a problem with this thing. It was jerking, like he'd be driving along, just start jerking real hard intermittently. So he took it to a local garage. They charged him $289 to replace a crank sensor, plus the cost of the crank sensor. Didn't do a relearn process on it, and the check engine light was still on and still was doing the jerking and bucking. So we talked to him. I told him, I said, well, let me just come get it. I'll see what I can do. The shop that put that crank sensor in charged him $289. Didn't give him a refund or anything. I said, we'll forget that. You're not going to take it back to there. So I got it. Now currently it has a camshaft position sensor code. I don't know if it had a code before for the crank or not. But if you have crank or cam codes, you take, put your scope on it and see if the two correlate where they should, and then move on from there. So the kicking and bucking, I start looking into it, and indeed they did replace the crank sensor, and he thought maybe it wasn't a good crank sensor, so he went and bought another one and put it in. So we have to inspect that. We just want to make sure that he got everything the way it needs to be. And the cam sensor code, I've gone ahead and pulled the cam sensor out, and I'll show you what we test here. Alright, so when I'm working on something I'm not familiar with, the system, how it works, and I need information, I go online and I get this from Mitchell. You can go in there and put in the vehicle you're working on, and you can get the repair information, wiring schematics, code meanings, repair techniques, procedures, stuff like that on there. And it costs you like a month is $29.99, I think, maybe. A year is like $40, and then several years is more than that. But I usually just get it for the year because it seems to be the best bargain, because more than likely we'll see this thing another time or two in the next year. But the importance of it to me is the fact that I can look up the code with my scanner, and my scanner is a Snap-on Virus, and it shows a lot of information about the code, why the code sets, some typical reasons why the code would set. But I don't find it's always as accurate as some of the other information you can find. So what I do, is I look it up on there, find out the parameters of the code, why does the code set, and what does code mean. After that, I start printing out wiring schematics, and as you can see, I've highlighted some stuff here that I want to pay attention to. Okay, and we're dealing with a camshaft position sensor code. Now, several things could happen. It could be the cam sensor itself is bad. It could be losing 5-volt reference to the sensor. It could be losing the ground to the sensor. It could be the signal coming back to the PCM is not good. It could be an intermittent problem somewhere. It could be in the crank sensor. It could be possibly in the timing chain, has some play in it, and it's not getting the signal when it's supposed to be. However, I don't think that is what this code is actually for, but you know, you get the idea. There's a lot of different things it could be, and we have to, I highlight these because every one of these is a splice. Okay, so this right here is a 5-volt reference splice. Okay, so if there's a splice here and the splice is bad and we start losing power to any of our sensors, possibly we could cause a check engine light or a code or an issue. So we don't want to rule anything out. We want to cover all our bases. So the first thing I'll do is unplug the crank sensor and the cam sensor, and we'll check our 5-volt reference, we'll check our ground, and then we'll check the integrity of the return line back to the ECM, as you can see here. Now, if you look here, this is the ECM, and the way they lay it out, this is connector 1, and these are the pin numbers. This is connector 2 from here down, and these are those pin numbers. And they're kind of grouped together, as you can see. You got ground, fuse battery positive, switch out, run and start, out, off, run, start, ground, EOP signal, engine oil pressure, generator sense, there you go, 5-volt reference, and so on and so forth. As you see, this is really not about sensors as much as it's powers, grounds, and communication. So then we have the injectors and so on and so forth. Now, the way the wiring schematic's laid out, you'll see this is the same as this. This is the power control module, connectors 1 and 2, power control module, connectors 2 and 3, kind of overlapping here, and powertrain control module, connectors, where is it, connector 4, connector 3, and connector 4. Now, there isn't 3 different power control modules. It's just done like this for the ease of laying out the diagram so you can see what all goes there and what it does. Now, on the powertrain control module, there are 4 connectors. So when there's 4 connectors, we need to know what the connectors are, the colors, and the pin numbers, so that we can check what we're looking for and check our wiring. So this is really good information. And really, having the information really makes it where a guy like me who doesn't do this all the time can possibly fumble his way through it and hopefully find a problem. So the next thing I want to do is, like I said, check all the wiring. We'll check our 5-volt reference, check our ground, check our signal lines coming back to the ECM. Now, to do a lot of this, we're going to be unplugging the PCM and the connectors. So after we check all that and we're happy, then what we want to do is look at the actual signal that the ECM is getting from the crank sensor and the cam sensor back to it, so we can compare the two. Alright, so it's important to have this hooked up right. So we want to make sure that we're on the right terminal of the connector so that we can test. We want to test this ground first. Now, in order to make sure we're on the right one, in that Mitchell information, you can actually go in and you can go to where the connector is, and it'll give you the pins of the connectors, and it'll show you a picture similar to this one. This is for the PCM, which we'll be using here in just a minute, but it gives you the layout of the pin so that you can find the pin number. You see how it's laid out, 1 through 10, 11, so on and so forth. So 29 is here, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, and 35. These are the 2 we're using on the crank sensor. Now, I'm checking at the cam sensor right now, which is right here. So I have to make sure that I'm on the ground, which is a dark blue and dark green tracer. The return signal is dark blue with a gray tracer. So we want to make sure we're on the right run. We want to check our 5 volts, so on and so forth. So we're going to get this, I got it back proved, I'll show you. And I like to use my test light setup here, because if it can hold this, then it can hold that sensor, because also that ground, remember, is shared amongst several sensors like I showed you. So what I do is I just take a test lead off the positive, run it to a fuse, so we're protected, and take the ground side, which is this white right here, and we're going to run it through that ground. We're going to run our ground to it. Okay, that tells us that the ground from that sensor back to the ECM is good. Now what we want to do is check our 5-volt reference, which is the other lead. So I have my meter set up here. Now we have to turn the key on to do that. Now in order to do, I want to leave this on because I want to make sure there's nothing goofy going on when I turn the key on. Okay, so I'll turn the key on. We're going to look, make sure we got our 5-volt reference, and then once we do that, we're going to plug it in. We'll turn the key off, plug the sensor in, leave it back probed, and then check it again and see what we have. All right, we'll plug back in. We still have 5 volts. All right, so the next thing I want to do is the same test procedure with the crank sensor, which is down here in the transmission. Gonna be hard to see, but basically it's the same ordeal. All right, I've got the connector unplugged right there. Wherever in the world it goes, you can't see it in the sun. There it is, right there. Got it back probed and checked for ground, and we're good on the ground. So now we're going to check 5-volt reference just like we did the other one. After that, we're going to probe for the return line, and I think actually what I might do is probe the signal lines from both sensors coming back to the PCM, so we can see what's actually coming into the PCM. That way we can see everything that the computer sees, not just what is here, just in case there's a variant. Alright, so I am back probed into PCM back here, and I got my test leads all ready to go. My leads to the scanner, which we're going to use it as a lab scope. It's a 4-channel lab scope. It's not the best one out there, of course, but it's like anything else. Anything that does a whole lot of different things usually doesn't do anything extremely well. But it is what it is, and it's what I got, so that's what we're going to work with. I've got it set up here. My meter and my lights set up. I've got it all above the engine so it doesn't get caught up in the belt or anything, or the exhaust, and melt it. And we're going to try and see if we can get this thing set up. I know it's going to be really hard to see here, but I've recorded this, and this is a crank signal, and you can see when it's up and down and up and down, it's very uniform. No cutouts, no drops, nothing. The cam sensor down here, what you're seeing is the signatures are 1 2 3 2 1 3 1 2 3. Now what that is that the cam gear is a big solid wheel portion of it, has cutouts, and what these are is every time one of those cutouts passes the cam sensor, this is what it's picking up. And the cam gear, I'll show you a picture of it right here. So that cam gear has cutouts. So what you're seeing is here, sorry my papers are blowing away, we're seeing 1 2 3 2 1 3 1 2 3. That's how it goes. And I can play this, continue to play this, and it's doing the same thing. Like I can stop it and go frame by frame and just move it just a little bit, and it is exactly what it's supposed to be with nothing cut out. So I'm not understanding why the code is being set, unless we just have an internal problem with the cam. Now this code will set as soon as you put it in drive and begin to just barely move. That check engine light will set right away. So there's something going on, because it's without fail you can trigger that code. Clear the codes, go to take off, forward, reverse, doesn't matter. As soon as you begin to move, that code sets. I gotta do a little digging. Alright, so I'm driving along with the scope hooked up, and the cam sensor indeed is losing signal. So what I've done is I have gone back out and moved it from where I had it pinned at the PCM, and I've got it pinned over at the crank sensor so that we can see if we have a signal coming out of the cam sensor and we're losing it between the cam sensor and the PCM, or if the cam sensor itself is dropping out. So let's head back and see what it does. All right, so I'm driving along and I'm kind of watching this a little bit here on the scope, and I am indeed getting that signal, but I'm still getting the same drivability problem. So we may have a problem between the wire, between the cam sensor and the PCM, because it's definitely putting the signal out. It's just not, we're losing it to the PCM somewhere. So now the fun part begins. We gotta start looking at wiring, find out where it's rubbing or what's going on. Take all this air cleaner back out. So now is the fun part of finding from the cam sensor all the way under here over into here and find that bad wire. So what I'll do first is I'll look for anywhere it looks like it's been rubbing or touching or whatever and go with that. If I don't find anything that way, then I'll start really getting a little more fine-tuned with it. Sometimes I'll disconnect it at this end, disconnect at that end, and I'll put a light on to run through the wire. So if it's making and breaking connection, as I move it, the light will go on and off, so it'll help me find it. I'll know if I touch it, you know, that I'm in the right area. So let me get to looking and see what we find. So all of it looked good till I got over to here, and I found a broken zip tie, and there's a metal bracket right there. It looks like it's rubbing on the bottom, but it's too hot right now. I can't get in there. So once it cools down, I'm gonna go underneath there and get a look, see if I can find anything. So there's this metal bracket right here, and these two wires right here, one is the cam and the other one, I can't remember what it was, but I tracked it down, and they're rubbing right on this little metal bracket right here, enough that it would cut out, lose the signal, go to ground, and come back. So we've replaced this transmission line recently, and it was leaking, so it's got all this electrical tape here, just nothing but goo. So we're gonna try and see if we can get this cleaned up as well at the same time, and then put the loom back over top of it, and hopefully that's it. That was not easy. There wasn't a lot to work with, and everything was so slimy. I ended up taking brake parts cleaner and wiping the wires down and inspecting them, but I've got it back together. I put heat shrink and solder with little deox on the connection, and then taped it all up in here. Then I put loom over top of it, then this protective cloth that was on it, and then I zip tied it again, so now it won't move. It'll stay where it belongs. So let's get the rest of this back together. We're gonna go drive it again, make sure we're okay. I probably should have repaired the wire and then drove it, because if there's a break somewhere else, I gotta cut all that back apart. That'll suck. I was tracing this wire back and getting ready to put all this back together, and I could feel just a little divot on that wire, and I flipped it around, and there was a hole in it. It looks like somebody had poked it. It had some green crusty on it. It wasn't the problem, but I don't want it to be a problem, so I just took it and cut it and took the electrical tape off of here so I can get a little more room to work. I'm going to heat shrink and solder that back together, put a little deox on it so it isn't a problem later. So there's a good possibility somebody else was looking for this, like that shop that replaced the other. They may have poked this wire, because it's been about 3-4 weeks, I think he said, since they did that. And when I took this apart, some of the little snaps that hold the covers on here were broken. So it's a very good possibility the guys that took their money for the crank sensor and didn't fix anything may have been in here poking around. So I'll have to make sure. Oh, look, there's another spot right there. Can you see it? I'll have to do that one too. Alright, well, I better inspect all these real well. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and solder that one, and I'll inspect the rest of them. Okay, we're headed out for a test drive. I want to go on backcountry roads, so in case I have troubles, it stops, stalls, whatever, I'm not on the highway. But I'm going to make my way up to the expressway. If it doesn't give me any trouble by then, that's about 15-minute, 20-minute ride to the expressway. Then I'm going to go up on the expressway, a couple exits, and see how it does, and turn around and come back, and go from there. That way, if I have troubles, at least my wife knows where I'm at. I told her which way I was going. So just give it a shot, see how it does. I want to get some miles under it. I put everything back together completely. I had to, obviously, to get on the highway. I'm pretty comfortable and pretty confident that we found the problem. So, let's just enjoy some scenery, take a little ride, and confirm we got her fixed. Alright, so after I did that repair, we have been driving this thing around a good bit. I've got 71 miles on it so far, and it has not acted up a bit. Check engine light is off, no codes, nothing going on. Runs and drives as smooth as the day we gave it to him. couple years ago, whenever that was. These people love this van. We loved it when we had it, and I know they'll be anxious to have it back. I've had it now for a couple of days, looking things over, trying to find it. I'm very thankful that I was able to find that spot where the wiring harness rubbed. I saw where the transmission fluid had been leaking before, and I never even gave it a thought, but it made all that, the electrical tape, real gummy, and it just kind of fell away, so nothing was really holding and protecting that wire from that bracket. So I believe that's the problem that we had. So when I cleaned it up and got it soldered back together, there was the fix for it. So $289 they paid the other shop to do this work, to put a crank sensor in it, plus the cost of the crank sensor, and all for a bad wire. So unfortunate, but at least we're fixed now. Tomorrow morning we're gonna go and run it through the car wash, get it cleaned up for them. When we get close to their house, we'll stop and top the tank off for them and get it dropped off, and hopefully it'll give them some more time and some more trips, and they'll continue to enjoy it. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, give us a thumbs up. Leave your comments down below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and we'll catch you on the next one, guys.